What's the word, learn Zawadi community? Welcome to another presentation, another exciting presentation on the gift that is Black history, the gift that is Black studies, the gift of Assata Shakur. Now, you already know how this go. Before we begin, go ahead and grab that journal, your dictionary, pencil, crayons, and markers. Before we get straight into it, all of them are gifts. This is just a continuation of a long list of gifts and gems I've been bestowing before y'all. So get ready to check this one out. So you already know how the program, how the agenda go. We're gonna kick it off with a word bank, get into some activities, talk about biography, major works, Assata's impact today, reflection, look at some sources, and then we're gonna close. To the right of the screen, you see this beautiful goddess, this brilliant goddess, Assata Shakur, domed out, traditional garb, you know, with the drip and the, yeah, you know what I mean, little chain, earpiece. Yeah, Sister Shakur, Sister Shakur. Word bank, word bank, word bank. So go ahead and pause this video, but before you do, grab that journal and that writing instrument I asked you to earlier, and right at the top of your page, Assata Shakur literacy moment. And then underneath that, I need you to go ahead and grab that dictionary or use your phone, whatever device you can use to look up information. Look up these terms, kicking it off with COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO. Next, I need you to look into the Black Panther Party. Then I want you to write out Deacons for Defense and write a definition for these words underneath each of these terms, and then go ahead and start that video again. Go ahead and pause the video, but before you do, for the activity section, I need you to write these questions underneath Assata Shakur literacy moment. The first is, how did the Black freedom movement in the 20th century, so like the 1900s, utilize self-defense and nonviolence to advance its cause? Second question is, how did COINTELPRO dismantle the Black freedom organizations and membership during the civil rights and Black power movements? Third, how have jails and prisons functioned in ways that unfairly treat incarcerated people? You know I'll never miss when I come with it. So I need you to answer all three of these questions in an artistic or written response. And if you don't know the answer, go ahead and Google it and then start the video again. So let's go ahead and get straight to it. Miss Assata Shakur. As you can see, this is a good sister, you know, with the wrist candy, the wrist candy, you know, at the on the right hand side, looking out the look off guard shoot. You know, they didn't have iPhones and Androids back in the day, but they still knew how to take a good picture. And so this is our good sister right there. So Assata was born Joanne Deborah Byron. Assata stands for She Who Struggles. And then her middle name, which I don't want to butcher, Olubala, I'm not pretty sure how to pronounce it. So y'all correct, yeah, if y'all got like a video or like a recording, y'all could give me a pronunciation of it, go ahead and let me know. It means savior, and then Shakur means thankful. If you're familiar with the name Shakur, that's because it is a familiar name. Often, especially within hip hop, we talk about Tupac Shakur. Just so happens that Assata was Tupac's, I believe, godmother or god auntie, one or the other, but they had they had some ties. She was born of cancer, July 16th, 1947. So right now we're looking at about the ending of World War II going on. A lot of pushes are being made within the military, Black folk who participated or were denied access and opportunity within certain industries, within the factories and within the participation as with regard to the military. We're fighting for inclusion. We had a lot of pushes towards integration happening during this period. It is out of this context that Joanne, aka Assata, is born in Queens, New York, on the East Coast of the US. Now, Assata traveled with her grandparents to and from New York, between her grandparents' spot and her mom's spot, and that's until she ended up getting becoming adopted by her auntie. Her auntie, who happened to be a lawyer, instilled in Assata a lot of educational gems, was able to help her build her skill set and wherewithal so that she could eventually, when she finished school or when she finished her educational training at whatever institution that she attended, she could earn her GED. And for those who don't know the GED, that's the graduate entrance. It's basically an exam you can take if you do not receive a high school diploma. You can take this test when you are ready, and they'll grant you the equivalent of a high school diploma. After that, Assata didn't stop there. Mind you, her auntie was a lawyer, well-studied, well-read. She ended up attending Manhattan Community College. And while at Manhattan Community College, she was immersed within the experience of, Black student organized life, and that the community college had ties to what was happening beyond the boundaries of that campus. The students were well aware of issues that were happening in the community and how those were replicated on campuses, the way these institutions, these educational institutions are complicit and irresponsible with regard to the allocation of resources, means of supporting families, struggling families, and communities divested from communities on and off campus. So Shakur, like her peers, saw this outrage and were outraged by it and were staging college sit-ins and protests. And it was one in particular at the age of 20 that she participated in which herself and I think it was over 90 other students who were participating in the demonstration were arrested for trespassing. One of the students who was also an activist on that campus, like Shakur, was named Louis Chesimar. I'm not pretty sure how to pronounce his name. And so they was cool. That was, her little Bonopolis. They linked up, they jammed. And I ain't talking about music. I'm talking about more than music, and they end up getting married early. So Assata was age 20 when she got married. That marriage didn't last long. Assata, in her book, from what I've read, cited gender role issues, meaning that whatever agreement that Lewis wanted Assata to follow with regard to her duties and responsibilities as his wife, she wasn't feeling it. It didn't fall within the scope of work and scope of life that she wanted to live. So she was like, see you later. Lewis was lost, whatever. So Assata ends up going to Oakland, where she meets with members of the Black Panther Party in Cali. And after that, she ends up coming back to Harlem, where she ends up using the knowledge she's gained from traveling to Oakland, which is the birthplace of the party, tied to the Lowndes County Freedom Organization that Stokely Carmichael had ties to in the South. When she returns to Harlem, she ends up joining the ranks, but she doesn't stay there long, similarly citing issues around gender within the party, I believe. She leaves the party to join the Black Liberation Army. And this is at age 23. She's young as spring chicken. Like she's young. So at age 23, she joins the Black Liberation Army. Assata, during the course of her participation in this organization, the group, and Assata included, are accused of criminal activity. This ranges from robberies, kidnappings, attempted murders, all kinds of different labels are placed on, or criminal labels are placed on Assata in this organization. COINTELPRO, which if you did your research in that previous slide about that particular definition, based on our research, based on our study, because see, when you drop your book, you lose your lesson. You see, that's why we had to pick the book up and look up, what is COINTELPRO? So COINTELPRO ended up targeting Assata because COINTELPRO, as you know, by that Hoover dude, I ain't talking about Larry Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, there was a open season on Black organized activists during the 1960s, 70s, particularly the 1970s. However, it stems from J. Edgar Hoover launching this program aimed at dismantling Black freedom organizations and their leaders. And so Assata was no different. And so what ends up happening is COINTELPRO targets Assata. So they're being harassed all over the place. And if you know any of the tactics, you can look at this recent movie that came out about Chairman Fred Hampton in Chicago. You can see some of the grimy, slick, and sneaky tactics they use to pretty much spread misinformation and myths and try to make organizations implode and make their members turn on each other, all kinds of stuff. And so there was a traffic stop. It was a minor traffic stop that ended up in the results in the death of one of BLA Assata's, or one of their people, and a New Jersey police officer at the New Jersey Turnpike. And so this traffic stop happens and it escalates out of control. And as you know, with Black folk and their experience and interactions with the police, it's usually up in the air, and it's usually it's become so much of a spectacle on a day-to-day basis, the kind of stuff that non-Black folk wouldn't believe, that it's become common to us, yet it still is a spectacle to others when it escalates. So this happens anyways. One of the officers ends up getting killed, and Assata gets a list of charges. And so this happened on May 2nd, 1973, while she is in custody, she's denied adequate medical care. She's put in, a lot of unjust and cruel conditions within the jail system and when her trial comes up, all the other charges that they listed, they tried to pin on Assata, were dropped. While they didn't have sufficient evidence, quote unquote, from what I'm hearing, 2 charges to convict Assata with the murder of that officer, she ended up getting convicted anyway. Now, before I get to that, during her course while in jail, she gives birth to her daughter. And I've been butchering names this entire video, but I'm gonna keep it going. I'm gonna go with Kakoya. And so while in jail, while in prison, she gives birth to her daughter, and she ends up getting convicted of murder. They give her life plus 26 to 33 years. Mind you, at the time in which the incident on the New Jersey Turnpike happened, Assata was about 26, 27 years old. And so she's 30 when she gets convicted. That means if she serves forget life, we didn't even talk about life. If she serves 26 years, she'll be out when she's about 56. Add life on that, you're looking at pretty much your whole middle-aged life to your whole middle-aged adult life to when you would become an old, like Assata wouldn't get home until she's about 80, something ridiculous, right? And so Assata had some real ones in the cut. And on March of 1979, individuals helped organize a breakout for Assata from the correctional facility for women in Clinton, New Jersey. She's aged 32, about 32 by then, and she ends up escaping. They come in that mud with guns, they aim them at the guards. The guards have to, life over the paycheck. They grab Assata and they escape. She disappears and doesn't emerge until Cuba grants her political asylum in 1984. She's age 37, almost touching 40. At age 40, after she gains political asylum, during this time, I imagine she's working on a book, her heralded major work known as Assata, which she publishes in 1987 at age 40, which chronicles her entire experience leading up to when she got to Cuba, but also talks about a lot of other stuff that we'll cover in another slide. Recently, this is in 2013, she would have been age 66, or around age 66. The FBI decided to name Assata onto their FBI's most wanted list. It is notable because, for one, out of everything that has happened in this nation, all the fugitives, all the people who are on the run, all that stuff, y'all tripping over this sister right here. It's notable too that she is the first woman, I believe, first woman, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever you want to call it. She is the first woman ever to be placed on that list. That's wild, y'all. That's wild. This is Assata Shakur, y'all. So what are Assata's major works? So Assata published, like I said, that autobiography while she was in 87 while in Cuba. She ended up publishing it through the Lawrence Hill book. Shout out to Lawrence Hill out of Chicago, Illinois. It is over 300 pages. However, each page is a treat. Like literally, I remember when I first read this book, it was in undergrad at St. Louis U through my African American Studies courses. There's a professor there named Dr. Katrina Thompson, and I think part of the reason why it was a series of different books. Ann Moody, a lot of these sisters that I'm sharing with you all through the Learn Zawadi platform came, at least initially, it came through that course, and she was very, Dr. Thompson Moore was very intentional on making sure that folk were, at least that her students were exposed to the contributions Black women made to the Black freedom movement. Ultimately, about Dr. King, Malcolm X, James Baldwin. I could go on, I could go on, I could go on. But Assata was a bad mother, for real. So it's over 300 page memoir that she published, and it was written during political asylum. So several of the themes that Assata talks on throughout her life are definitely on gender. She talks about the way in which women were expected or assumed to have to be confined to participate in only certain forms of labor within organized life, even within Black organized freedom struggles, which she actively pushed against. So gender, sex, she talked about education, and there's a quote at the bottom I'm gonna read this kind of speaks to that, so I'm not gonna speak on that too much right now. She definitely talks about a lot of things around the ways in which the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement have these images and labels placed on them around violence and nonviolence and strategy and tactics, when really, when you living in that moment, you have, it's more complex than that. It wasn't that one movement was nonviolent, one movement was violent, or more leaning towards militant nonviolence or self-defense. It was all and, but, I mean, it was both and. And so this is a quote from the text from Assata. When I think of how racist, how Eurocentric our so-called education in America is, it staggers my mind. And when I think back to some of those kids who were labeled troublemakers and problem students, I realized that many of them were unsung heroes. I see Mama Jamala. Were unsung heroes who fought to maintain some sense of dignity and self-worth. So, when you unpack this quote right here, Assata's really speaking to the ways in which, as she was developing, as she was coming up in her educational experience within schools, how the content that was delivered, the information that students were expected to receive, were often one-dimensional in terms of what it conveyed about truth, what it conveyed about history, what it conveyed about English, what it conveyed about art. And Assata here in this passage is speaking to how young people are, when they're expected to accept a one-dimensional narrative that paints their heritage, paints their history, paints their culture, paints their background as just peripheral, it's just a side note, it's just a footnote, it's not relevant to the larger conversation about history, English, all these different things. That's problematic, and they sometimes act out, or they will act out, as a means of affirming themselves, right? And so that's, in so many words, how Assata breaks that down. And this is just a piece, a slither of the entirety of that 300-page memoir. So I do encourage you to check it out and get it. Assata Shakur, good people. The autobiography. So going to the reflection, I need you to write 3 things about Assata that you learned so far in this video. 3 things artistically written. Pause the video to do so. What did you learn from what I covered with you? What is your takeaways from Assata? There may be some points that I've highlighted, some points that I didn't really emphasize. What did you take away? And then you can begin the video. Some sources. Let's see, let me try and skip that. There we go. So I'm going this a little different direction, but I be at the point where we family now. We are going through this together. So it is what it is. So as far as Assata's impact today, I talked a little bit about this when I spoke to education, but education is critical, right? It's important that when we discuss themes around what is shared with young people, that it's assessed critically. The next thing is on tactics. Just like the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, those tactics were not always one-dimensional, using that word one-dimensional, or conveyed in one way. Talk about responsibility. There's a quote from Assata that people often chant at protests, but that tied to the recent uprisings in Ferguson, even with Trayvon Martin, etc. They say it's our duty to fight for our freedom, it's our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose by our chains. That comes from this sister right here, Assata Shakur. And really what it is a redoubling down on the need to lift up self, family, and community. So I want to give ultimate thanks to you all for checking out this Zawadi. On all my Patreon and YouTube subscribers and viewers, particularly Brother Joshua Salim, Jason Ebinger, Sister Justine Collum, with special gratitude to Sister Eileen Berman for supporting the Learn Zawadi platform as you all do. So I need you to go ahead and share this gift, share the link to this video, share the gift that is Black Studies, the gift that is Assata Shakur. It's so much more to hear and learn about their sister, and there's so much more within the larger story that is Black history, that is Black Studies. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Check out the next one coming soon.